Hello friends, James Stevenson back with part 26 in my Tesla earnings forecast video review series. I am joined as always by my co-host, Loki, who has turned right back around the way he was facing before. I'll come back to the intro page. I like to start by showing you Loki. But what I want to say now is this video will not be 49 minutes long like the previous one was. The previous video went way longer than I thought it would. I did cover 400 rows of my detailed forecast model, so you can't do that very fast. And and give people the free show they paid for without having to issue refunds. This show is free, folks. Don't boo me. It's free. This is a labor of love. I do this. I do this because I love. Right? There's my heart. It's hard for me to see that the camera is reversing my image on the screen in front of me. But yeah, I am wearing my Tesla AI Day t-shirt. Just came in, actually. Today is my first day wearing it. So with that, I will go and share my desktop and assure you that this video will be a lot less than 49 minutes. But not if I keep stalling the whole time and not getting to the content. So let's jump right into the content. It's extremely similar to what you just saw in part 25. I'm going to assume everybody just saw part 25. So we've made it through stage 1 and stage 2. This is stage 3. What do we do in stage 3? The same thing we just did in stage 2. Instead of revenue, we're going to do cost of sales. So revenue tells you how much the buyer is paying for the stuff that they get. Stage 3 is telling you what the cost of sales is, which is how much it costs Tesla to make the stuff that the people are buying. I don't think I can say it any clearer than that. That's what cost of sales is. It's the direct and somewhat indirect costs. The accounting people are going to put me in hot water for trying to simplify it this much. It's the cost of delivering to the buyer what they bought. That's what costs of sales are. There is actually a distinction between cost and expense. Expenses happen because time passed. Costs happen because people bought stuff. So if you hear people using cost and expense interchangeably, it's common for people to do that, but not precisely correct. The correct distinction between those is that you have costs of sales because those costs are driven higher by sales being higher. Expenses are not. Expenses are, a monthly expense happens every month because another month happened and the bill for that month came due. Every bill you pay monthly is an expense. It's not a cost. So let's dive in. So for Fremont Model S, it's exactly the same format we just saw for revenue. We're just trying to figure out now, okay, how much will it cost Tesla to make that base config that people were buying for $95,000, $105,000? What's the cost of that base config? Well, I've got that amount rising some over time last year, increasing, and increasing some more. I'm holding it flat in Q1 of 2023 because I can't decide whether the base config price of Model S is going to go up or down. So I have split the difference by holding it to the same number. From here on out, I think the kinds of cost efficiencies Tesla was talking about in their Investor Day presentation are going to start paying dividends. And the base config of Model S will come down as continuous improvement is made in manufacturing it. This vehicle has been getting produced since 2012 with a pretty major Plaid upgrade a couple of years ago. And Tesla will continue working on that cost to the extent that they can. Like some of this is raw materials pricing, metals, commodity pricing. There's not very much Tesla can do about those prices apart from lock in long-term contracts with suppliers at pre-negotiated rates. you can't do a lot about what the market price of metals is except pay it and move on with your day. So I have the cost of paint rising some over time. That's a pretty small portion of the total cost for Model S. Performance package, I've got these costs coming down over time. So I've got it at 58% of the new lower price. So performance package, some of the electric motor efficiencies we saw at Investor Day, part of the reason why this can come down over time for that Plaid Model S upgrade. Wheels do cost something. The upgraded wheels have a cost associated with the upgrade price. People pay for it. Interiors may cost a little more for the different color interior. Full self-driving, I do plug in a $100 variable cost per FSD package sold. The true number may be a lot less than that, but I figured $100 wouldn't go amiss as being some cost to go along with the $15,000 package price of full self-driving at whatever take rate you think there is. Let's see here. Destination delivery fees, regulatory credits, other are the other adjustments that get you to the total cost per Model S sold. 86 grand last year, hopefully a little less this year than it was last year as Tesla continues to hone that line. Same idea for Model X. A little more dramatically because Model X got its Plaid upgrade a little later than Model S got its. So last year they were still knocking down those prices pretty significantly. And I've got some continued improvement forecast here for Model X. I promised I was going to go faster through these, so I'm gonna. This is pretty similar to what you see for Model S above. Then for the Fremont Model 3, at the bottom line here, we can see this is a more expensive vehicle this year than it was last year. California is an expensive place to make vehicles. The labor cost per vehicle is high. The Fremont Model 3 doesn't have all the advantages like front and rear casting, structural pack that we'll see from Texas and Berlin later. So their costs are just a little higher, having to make stuff I don't want to say the old-fashioned way, but with the initial approach Tesla took to building Fremont Model 3, they are still cranking out Model 3s from the tent, the GA3 assembly line in Fremont. So that's what you see reflected in these costs. Then for the Fremont Model Y, I've got those costs about the same in 2023 as we saw in 2022, 42 grand ish, somewhere in that neighborhood, with the base cost coming down some, and then the performance package costs being maybe a little higher than we saw them in some of the quarters last year. Interior seating, tow hitch costs being up a little bit. Not much else there to talk about. Fremont Roadster, I'm not even going to talk about. It's so speculative. We don't know when Tesla's going to start making those. Let's get to Shanghai and talk about their Model 3. These costs are lower because it is cheaper to make vehicles in Shanghai than it is to make them in basically San Francisco, California, where labor costs are high, transportation costs are high. There aren't a lot of very local suppliers, so you're paying a lot for shipping and freight. Whereas in Shanghai, you can get a lot of very local production to support the parts that you buy in, the ones you're not making yourself. And then the labor costs are lower because there's less labor hours required per vehicle produced in Shanghai, and because the wage rates are lower, so they have a newer designed factory to make that Model 3 at lower cost. So these costs ought to be lower. I do have them growing some as time goes by, peaking at $32,000 at the cash buyer cost of sales line, and about the same at the bottom line, total cost of sales per delivery. Shouldn't get much higher than 32 grand and then the rest of the year we'll see it about where it was to end last year. For the Shanghai Model Ys, what do we see at the bottom line here? This vehicle got a little more expensive to produce last year, with raw materials prices increasing 31 to 33,000. I've got that peaking at about 34,000 per vehicle, and then improving a bit over the course of the year, with 33.3 to end Q4 being very similar to where we saw Q4 of 2022. Let's fly to Germany and check out what the Berlin Model Y is doing. These costs are coming down considerably for the base model, which we see reflected at the bottom line as well, with much lower costs of sales per delivery, and that ought to continue happening. What's going on here? More and more Model Ys are being produced by Giga Berlin. GF4 is making more and more of these, and the more of them you make per hour, the lower your labor cost per vehicle will go, because each hour of paid wage is resulting in more Model Ys being produced. Right, so the labor component is driving these cost improvements. And if we go to the Texas Model Y, you'll see a similar story with continuing cost improvements expected here. By the end of 2023, the Texas Model Y ought to cost less than the Fremont Model Y costs. I still have the base cost a little higher. I'm just multiplying by the Fremont amount up here because Fremont's been making Model Y for so much longer. They've had more of a chance to optimize their production line, but the costs below that, pretty steady over time. Not a lot to talk about here, so going forward into the future, you should see continued cost reductions from Model Y, the more of them they can make from that factory. Then for Cybertruck, these insanely high amounts early on just reflect extremely low production counts. So Tesla will lose money selling Cybertrucks until they can pass the break-even point, at which it's costing them the same amount of money per vehicle that they're charging per vehicle. And at that point, they'll be making zero gross margin. And then for any production output beyond that point, they'll start to have positive gross margin contribution, which is still not profit contribution. You've got to do better than that to cover your operating expenses before Cybertruck will actually be accretive to bottom line earnings. And we have Semi next. If you thought the Cybertruck costs per vehicle were bad, check these out. I had this at $1 million per Semi sold in Q4 because Tesla only sold 34 of them in Q4, right? So $34 million of total cost for those 34 semis delivered may not be wrong. A quarter is a long time to have to pay that entire crew that works at that factory in Nevada. You may not be able to pay that whole team, plus buy all the raw materials and parts that went in the door for only $34 million, right? So this cost increases as the number of semis produced increases, but the total cost of sales per delivery decreases steadily over time until by the end of 2023 or at some point in 2024, Semi will become a profitable vehicle for Tesla to produce and contributing toward earnings. And that is the detail in the cost of sales section. Again, you see summary sections at the bottom for cash buyers, for leased buyers, and then for total cost of sales here. So I don't need to talk about that very much. Those are just adding up what's above them. So total cost per vehicle is increasing by more than total revenue, total automotive revenue. So you'll see less automotive gross margin dollars in Q1 than we saw in Q4, mostly as a result of those price cuts, particularly on the Model Ys made in really every location, but especially China and Berlin. That brings us to the non-automotive costs of sales. So we've got solar panels here. We've got solar roof. I'm really just planning these based on assumptions about what their cost of sales is. Then we've got Powerwall here. Let me jump into this formula and take a look at it. So I'm comparing the revenue average over the trailing 12 months against the cost average over the trailing 12 months on a per AA 573 basis. So that's, yeah, the current quarter's Powerwall revenue. I'm just saying, all right, you take the revenue that we're going to get this quarter and you multiply it by the average cost of sales we've had over the 12 trailing months with an assumption that we can improve that rate by 2%, is what that formula is telling you. So I've got that same kind of formula working on all of these lines, assuming that Tesla will be improving the cost of sales rate versus what they've been reporting in the actuals, and just trending that forward. Then for Megapack, I just have cost of sales rates assumed here. So it was an 87% rate in Q4 to the best of my estimation, and that ought to improve to only a 75% cost of sales in Q1. Sounds high, but it's not bad. 65%, 55%, 50% cost of sales. Split the difference on the revenue. Call it half gross margin, half cost of sales by the end of this year, and then make progress towards that as the year goes on, is what I'm forecasting for Megapack, with the hope that Tesla can beat that. I know it sounds like a ton of improvement, but if the costs per Megapack can be about $1 million, and if you're going to be able to sell them for about $2 million, this may not be way off. I mean, this is the best estimate I can give you at this point, and we will learn more as time goes by and Tesla reports more actuals. Other energy cost of sales I have improving as time goes by, as more of this becomes software as a service, which ought to have a very low variable cost. And then services and other, the same kind of formula, just assuming ongoing cost improvement, the kind that Tesla described in the Investor Day presentation that you should all hopefully have seen by now. At the bottom I have the total cost of sales dollars for all divisions combined with the total cost of sales percentage, and then what's left over after you subtract this from the total revenue. And the gross margin percent is just 1 minus the cost of sales percentage. And that is the end of stage 3 in my detailed Tesla earnings forecast model. I'm only 18 minutes in right now, and I'm going to make a ton of hay right now by just saying the next section. All of these, you can go review them in my 69 tweet forecast thread. They're all just taking the cost number from stage 3 and dividing it by the revenue number from stage 2. So I'm going to title this Stage 4, and you get this for free right now. Stage 4 cost of sales percentage by site model and revenue type. It's hardly even can be called a stage because there's no assumptions in this stage. Every single one of these numbers is just taking the cost divided by the revenue. That's it. So for every single assumption I'm making, you can go see, let me scroll back over to the right area. You can see exactly what I'm forecasting. So Texas Model Ys, I had at a 95% cost of sales, 104% cost of sales, 95, 87, 91, 83, 74, and then 68 by the end of 2023 is what's in my forecast. So yeah, the whole section works that way. So Cybertrucks, semis, extremely high cost of sales percentages, and then coming down to back down to earth with more reasonable cost of sales percents. You always want that to be less than 100%, or else you have no chance of making money selling that product. But it's okay if you lose money for a short period of time as you ramp up production of those products. And that's that whole section. And at the end of that section, it's where we began with the income statement. The income statement begins by giving you the revenues by division and the cost of sales by division that you just saw in this video and the previous one for how I'm forecasting revenue and cost of sales. And now you are all the way up to date. That's the entire detailed model tab, and that's the last video I'll make on the detailed model tab. So let's check back in with Loki, see how he's doing. He's just laying down, chilling, relaxing. He says I've got it covered. And with that, I will end the video and say if you've enjoyed today's video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel already, why not go ahead and subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell to get alerted whenever I post fresh content. Thank you to everyone who supports my efforts, either through Patreon or by joining my YouTube channel, as my executive producers, Kathy Kitchler and Halter Ferguson Financial, did at the highest support tier, earning them a thank you at the end of every video. And I'll see you in the next one.